And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very high above all the puerile and vacuous forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. So did everyone watch the CNN town hall last night? I didn't. Frankly, I didn't even know that it was going on because I don't pay that much attention to what happens on CNN because I know intuitively that it's a bunch of bull crap most of the time. And so there is really no reason to, switch over to that channel. But I should have last night because CNN, at least half-heartedly, tried to portray itself as a reputable news outlet. Now, what I mean by that is they had Kamala Harris on for what I think was an entire hour, and they actually held her to account. Anderson Cooper turned into the guy that he used to be when he was a budding journalist. Now, the first time I ever saw Anderson Cooper was on this program that was in schools here in Wyoming called Channel 1. And it was a news program that was geared towards high school students, well, middle school and high school students. And Anderson Cooper was one of the reporters on there. Well, here we are, 20, how old am I? Yeah, so 30 years later, and Anderson Cooper is on CNN. And for a long time, he has been a partisan hack. Now, I'm not suggesting that he isn't still a partisan hack. He just wasn't last night. Let me give you a little example of what I'm talking about, and then we'll get into the program. Here is CNN's Dana Bash talking about Harris's performance last night. Get a load of this.
I'm hearing from people who I have been talking to, and that is that if her goal was to close the deal, they're not sure she did that. And, some people have asked, is she being held to a different standard? Maybe, but that's maybe the world that she's living in. And on the question of who she is, people are understanding that a little bit more, but what she will do, the question about her legislative priorities, name one, there wasn't one. Some more of her personality and her sort of character questions about.
If you're shopping for a
all
home,
right.
Forever to find
How did I
want.
get an ad in the middle of that thing? Anyway, so you get the whole point of what Dana Bash was saying. Did she explain to voters what she was going to do? No. Did they learn anything about any of the policies of Kamala Harris? No. Did she answer a whole bunch of questions with her stereotypic word salad? Absolutely. I've got a ton of sound bites stacked up for you to go through this whole thing. But I think one of the bigger stories from last night's town hall on CNN is they actually half-heartedly attempted to do their job. That is, report the media. Now, up until now, they've been carrying the water for Kamala Harris and every Democrat, really. And honestly, the cow pie and the CNN, they're pretty much, they operate in the same space. Of course, the cow pie in Wyoming, if you're a liberal Republican, Republican in name only, a redcoat, then of course you're going to receive 100% favorable coverage. But if you're a conservative, well, then, the cow pie is going to give you 100% negative coverage. And so is the case with CNN and Donald Trump. 100% of the time, they give, up until now, Kamala Harris pretty favorable coverage. And if your name is Donald Trump, well, then you're a fascist and a dictator, and there's no way you're going to get favorable coverage. Now, I'm not suggesting that last night Anderson Cooper or anybody at CNN had anything good to say about Donald Trump, because as far as I can tell, they didn't. But it wasn't a glowing endorsement of Kamala Harris either. So on today's program, I have got a number of pieces directly related to that town hall. And I think that we absolutely should do a deep dive into it. I know that we could dismiss everything Kamala Harris says as bullcrap, but still, you are going to run into people in Wyoming that are Harris and Walz supporters. I've been getting a constant stream of pictures from the operatives of the Cowboy State operatives, Cowboy State politics operatives across the state, pictures of Harris Walz signs wherever they might be found. And so what I'm saying is, if you know the facts, if you know how Kamala Harris performed, well, then you can you'll be able to fend off some of those friends of yours that are just liberals. And you say, hey, did you hear what she said at the town hall? No? Well, go listen to David's program, and you can hear it for yourself. A couple of program notes. Today is the deadline for John Conrad to schedule a time for an interview with me. I'm still hopeful that he will, because there's some serious questions that I want to ask him. I've already got the Joe Webb interview. And if you're unfamiliar with this whole race, let me just explain what's going on here. Joe Webb defeated John Conrad in the primary, pretty handily too, by a couple hundred votes. And then after the primary, John Conrad tried to run for county commissioner, and he was unsuccessful at doing that. I think it was a paperwork thing. And then he decided that he was going to run a write-in campaign against Joe Webb. So, you can run a write-in campaign if you want. It's not unheard of in American politics. The one that comes to mind, most prominently, at least for me, is Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. Same thing happened to her. She lost her primary and then ran a write-in campaign and was successful, and she's been there ever since. So it's not that it can't be done. It's just very, very difficult to do. And so I wanted to interview the both of them and get them both on the record. And so right now I have an agreement in principle from John Conrad to do an interview. But I gave him a deadline of 5 p.m. today to decide whether or not he was going to set it up. And I can promise you this. If you don't agree to an interview on Cowboy State Politics, or on the Independence Network for that matter, that doesn't mean that we're not going to do a show about you. So you can talk to us, or we're going to talk about you. And I figured, just to be fair, I would invite Conrad on the program, and that way I could ask him those questions in personal, because there's a whole bunch of them. Related to his voting record, why he's running a write-in campaign, his activities in the legislature, and I had hoped to even get into some of the his activities in the party. But there's a lot of questions, and I just wanted to give him a fair opportunity to talk about them. So I'm hoping that's what's going to happen. He has until 5 o'clock today. So if you're down in Uinta County and you know John Conrad, you might suggest that he set up an interview with me, and that way he can answer all these questions himself. So, if you can do that. Oh, by the way, if you want to be part of the program today, we might take some calls a little bit later on in the broadcast, maybe about 10:30. The call-in line is 307-374-8989. The studio line, 307-374-8989. If you're watching the Ditto Cam, it's up on the chalkboard. You can actually get it right from there. Or when I open up the phone lines, I'll put the phone number down at the bottom of the screen if you happen to be watching the Ditto Cam. Let's see here. Other program notes. I don't really think of anything right now. Can't really think of anything right now. So if it comes to me, I will let you know and we'll get back to it. But we begin this morning with the blaze. Kamala Harris keeps reminding voters that she's Joe Biden 2.0. And I quote, CNN hosted a town hall with Kamala Harris Wednesday night, and it went about as poorly as you'd expect. When she wasn't avoiding questions prospective voters asked her, the Democrat presidential nominee was delivering nonsensical answers to host Anderson Cooper, and he confronted her over her radical left-wing positions. Needless to say, it was like watching a real-life female version of Michael Scott from The Office on stage. The most revealing moment of the night, however, came when Harris was asked how her presidency would differ from that of Joe Biden's. Like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming car, the vice president had no real answer to give. She shot off generic statements about her presidency will not be a continuation of the Biden administration, saying that she represents, quote, a new generation of leadership on a number of issues, but didn't specify how her administration would be different. The Democrat presidential nominee was thoroughly incapable of differentiating herself from Joseph R. Biden. And therein lies her biggest problem, my friends. It is absolutely, without a doubt, the most vapid, nonsensical presidential campaign in our country's history. That she doesn't really have any answers to anything. And those answers that she does give, they're so filled with platitudes that they don't really mean anything. So I want to break down just for a second what that phrase, a new generation of leadership, actually means. Well, first of all, it's probably true because Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, is of a very different generation than is Kamala Harris. So, yeah, by definition, it would be a new generation of leadership, but that doesn't tell you anything about the policies. You see, what politicians try to do is fill you with platitudes that don't really mean anything. And let me give you a classic example. In several counties across the state of Wyoming, there are measures on the ballot to add a 1% tax for whatever project. And it's an optional specific use tax that individual counties can vote themselves if they want to do a project or something. But a lot of the ballot measures, including the one in Sheridan and the one in Weston County, or Crook County, excuse me, they're not really all that specific at all. It doesn't tell you which project they're going to do, how much it costs. It doesn't tell you how they're going to spend your money. And so what happens is counties are allowed to spend your taxpayer dollars on things like a $3 million flower pot. I know you've heard me mention that on the program a couple of times, but let me just explain what that is. So there was a street right beside the Sheridan County Courthouse. It was called Brooks Street, and it was a big, gigantic hill, and so steep that they had to close it off during the winter. They'd open it up in the spring when all the ice melted, but for the winter, that thing was closed off. Well, the Sheridan County commissioners decided that they were going to build a garden there, or a flower pot. And so, using $750,000 of money that was supposed to go to road maintenance, they decided they would build this giant flower pot. And I'm telling you, my friends, this is the ugliest darn thing I've ever seen. Most of it is filled up with this white decorative rock. There's a sidewalk that kind of winds its way through there. I guess they're going to put some statues in there with to have some art or something. But $3 million of taxpayer money that was earmarked for something else. Well, the reason I use that as an example is if you are not specific about what the ballot measure says, well, then you can get it to mean whatever you want it to mean. And the people that are pushing this sort of thing, they say things like, 58% of the sales tax money that is, spent in our counties, well, that comes from tourists. Well, on face, that's not true because there's no way that they can figure that out. It is an estimation. It is a guess. It has no basis in reality. There are no actual numbers that back that up. But because it sounds good, politicians are able to convince you of things that just are marginally true or can't be proven at all. And that's the same type of thing that happens at the top. You hear people like Kamala Harris saying, well, I'm a new generation of leadership. Well, that's so vague that, it's a truism to begin with, but it doesn't tell us anything. And just like those ballot measures, we have no idea where that money is going to go, and we have no idea what Kamala Harris is going to do. But it is typical of what all of these politicians want to do. And it was on full display last night, my friends. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I've got a lot of sound bites lined up, and we're going to get to them right after the break. They're absolutely incredible. I mean, and a lot of them just make you laugh because that's about the only thing you can do with Kamala Harris. More after the break. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Cowboy State Politics is sponsored by FreedomGoldUSA.com. They are the working man's gold company. The economy is in turmoil. The stock market pretty much is out of control, and you never know what's going to happen with your finances or your income. One way that you can shore up everything is by investing in gold and silver. Go to freedomgoldusa.com/David for a free interview to discuss your options and find out if gold or silver is right for you. One more time, that's freedomgoldusa.com/David. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics live on the Independence Network, on Facebook, on Twitter, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by God to himself. Doing a public service for the mainstream media, doing their show prep for them. All they have to do is listen to Cowboy State Politics, and I've pretty much done all of the prep they need. They just need to kind of respond to everything I'm saying. So it's not only information and entertainment for you, it is show prep for the Wyoming media. Well, last night, Kamala Harris held a town hall on CNN, and I dare say that I don't think it was at all what she had expected. In fact, I'm pretty sure that she expected absolutely no pushback whatsoever. But when you're having a town hall with Kamala Harris, unless you just want to hear an hour's worth of platitudes, you got to have a little bit of pushback. You got to do something to keep yourself entertained, which I imagine that's exactly what Anderson Cooper was doing. At least that's what I would be doing. Now, the first question, one of the first questions is, if you had anything to do differently, if you could change anything, if you could say that there's one mistake you would have made, what would it be? Now, that's a pretty fair question. I think that just about anybody, if you ask them, hey, man, is there a mistake you made that you wish you could have handled differently? I think just about everybody would say, well, yeah, there was this situation or that situation. Not so in Kamala Harris's case. From Breitbart, and I quote, Vice President Kamala Harris acknowledged during a Wednesday CNN town hall that she is, quote, not perfect, and although she would not admit to making a mistake on any specific policy. The answer underscores her failure as vice president. Under the Biden-Harris administration, costs have soared on average 20% across the board. Russia has invaded Ukraine, Hamas and Iran attacked Israel, illegal immigrants invaded the southern border, and the nation suffered the deadly Afghan withdrawal. So, quote, What weaknesses do you bring to the table, and how do you plan to overcome them while you're in office? CNN's Anderson Cooper asked Kamala Harris. Quote, well, that's a great question, she replied, and I'm certainly not perfect, so let's start there. And I say that's a perfect place to start. Here we go. Kamala is not perfect.
That's a great question, Joe. Well, I am certainly not perfect, so let's start there.
Oh, don't we all know that? Absolutely, she's not perfect, nor is anybody else. And she continued, I mean, I've made many mistakes, and they range from, if you've ever parented a child, oh man, it went on, and it was a classic attempt to try to evade a question that had just the simplest of answers. Here, give it a listen.
Is there something you can point to in your life, political life, or in your life in the last 4 years that you think is a mistake that you have learned from?
I mean, I've made many mistakes, and they range from, if you've ever parented a child, you make lots of mistakes too. In my role as vice president, I mean, I've probably worked very hard at making sure that I am well versed on issues, and I think that is very important. It's a mistake not to be well versed on an issue and feel compelled to answer a question.
So there's nothing that I could point to that I've ever made a mistake doing. Now, former President Donald Trump has noted many specific mistakes he makes or he looks to improve upon in his second administration. There's a couple of examples, one of which was the bump stock ban. Major mistake and major setback for the Second Amendment. And there are lots more. The COVID vaccine was another one, though he didn't mandate that people took it. He did push a totally fictitious shot that actually ended up causing heart attacks with a lot of people. Big mistake there. I really think that was a major boo-boo. But majority of Americans, 52%, feel they are worse off today than they were 4 years ago under Donald Trump. And that's according to Gallup. It was a poll that was released last Friday. 4 years ago, the nation was in the midst of the pandemic, which greatly impacted the economy and the lives of millions of Americans. Despite the crises, Americans believe they were better off during Trump's administration. And why wouldn't they? There wasn't rampant inflation. They were spending like drunken sailors, but I guess maybe you could make an argument for that. I think that's definitely something that Trump could look at and say, yep, it was a mistake to send out checks to everybody. It drove up the deficit, and it created a whole bunch of people that don't want to work. So clearly a mistake. But I think that if you want to sum up the entire town hall, we should listen to David Axelrod. Now, David Axelrod is the architect behind Barack Obama's elections, his election and his reelection. And so Democrats look to him as kind of him and Bill Clinton are like the Oracle of Delphi of the Democrat Party. They're the people that everybody goes to for answers. But take a listen to what David Axelrod had to say about Kamala Harris's performance.
Things that would concern me, and then she did one thing at the end that I thought was really important. The things that would concern me is when she doesn't want to answer a question, her habit is to kind of go to word salad city, and she did that on a couple of answers. One was on Israel. Anderson asked a direct question, would you be stronger on Israel than Trump? And there was a 7-minute answer, but none of it related to the question he was asking. And so, on certain questions like that, on immigration, I thought she missed an opportunity because she would acknowledge no concerns about any of the administration's policies. And that's a mistake. Sometimes you have to concede things, and she didn't concede much.
Yeah, so sometimes you have to concede things, and if you're an honest person, which let's be honest, Kamala Harris is the furthest thing from an honest person. So of course she's not going to concede anything. She wouldn't do that because, according to her, it's Donald Trump that makes all of the mistakes, and it's not Kamala Harris. But if you're an honest person and if you want to be, straight up with your voters, well, I would say that you'd have to be a little bit honest. Another fascinating exchange came around immigration and the border wall. Take a listen to this.
Is a border wall stupid?
Well, let's talk about Donald Trump and that border wall.
Okay, so this is the part that I was referring to at the beginning of the show, or at the beginning of this segment, that Anderson Cooper actually gives Kamala Harris a little bit of pushback. So we'll take a listen. We might do a little stop and start, but this is amazing.
Remember, Donald Trump said Mexico would pay for it? Come on, they didn't. How much of that wall did he build? I think the last number I saw was about 2%. And then when it came time for him to do a photo op, you know where he did it? In the part of the wall that President Obama built.
But you're agreeing to a bill that would earmark $650 million to continue building that wall.
I pledge that I am going to bring forward that bipartisan bill to further strengthen and secure our border. Yes, I am. And I'm going to work across the aisle to pass a comprehensive bill that deals.
Now, keep listening to Anderson Cooper. Try to give her pushback as she goes along. I mean, I haven't seen him do this in a very long time.
With a broken immigration system. I think Jackson's question, part of it was to acknowledge that America has always had migration, but there needs to be a legal process for it. People have to earn it. And that's the point that I think is the most important point that can be made, which is we need a president who is grounded in common sense and practical outcomes. Like, let's just fix this thing. Let's just fix it. Why is it?
Yeah, I know. It's painful to listen to, but trust me, it's all worth it in the end.
There any ideological perspective on it? Let's just fix the problem.
To fix the problem, you're doing this compromise bill. It does call for $650 million that was earmarked under Trump to actually still go to build the wall.
I am not afraid of good ideas where they occur.
So you don't think it's stupid anymore?
I think what he did and how he did it did not make much sense because he actually didn't do much of anything. I just talked about that wall, right? We just talked about it. He didn't actually do much of anything.
But you do want to build some wall.
I want to strengthen our border.
See, she can't even admit when she's been caught. And this is the whole problem. Anderson Cooper had her dead to rights, and he did give her some pushback. To his credit, like I said, I haven't seen him do that in a really long time. But, I mean, just amazing, right? There is no question that she was absolutely caught, and Anderson Cooper knew it. And there was nothing that she could say. Now, remember, let's go back a couple of months, what she said in the past.
We don't need to build a wall. This is a crisis of his own making. And by definition, just plain speak, basic English language definition, it is not an emergency.
We have the President of the United States who has created a fiction about a crisis at the border, and he has held up the United States government and its workers.
Okay, so there she is, not that long ago, saying it is a fiction that there's a crisis at the border. Well, now, during a town hall, she's saying, well, no, we're going to strengthen our border security. If there is not a crisis at the border, why do you need to strengthen border security? It is just the perfect example of Kamala Harris going back and forth on just about everything. And she can't give a straight answer to any of this. Now, one of the parts that I found particularly offensive was this one. She's talking about, she's asked if what role her faith plays. And I can't remember exactly how Anderson Cooper asked the question, but here was her answer. And then I'm going to play you what she said last week.
But I just called him. I needed that spiritual kind of connection. I needed that advice. I needed a prayer, and there's a part of the scripture that talks about Esther and a time such as this, and that's what we talked about, and it was very comforting for me. And do
you pray every day?
I do pray every day. I do pray every day, sometimes twice a day.
Sometimes twice a day, and if you asked Kamala Harris to her face, she would tell you, I have the patience of Job and all of his faith, and I pray every day, and I need a passel of pastors around me. Now, that's what she wants you to believe. But when things are actually put to her, let's see if I've got the sound, but I'm pretty sure I do here. Remember last week where she said, you're at the wrong rally? Let's see here. I know. Here we go. Remember this?
Of Roe v. Wade, and they did as he intended. Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally.
Now, what happened there is someone in the crowd shouted, Jesus is Lord. And Kamala Harris's reply is, I think you guys are at the wrong rally. Well, just last night, Kamala Harris was saying, I pray every day. Now, here's a part where I think a lot of Christians get caught up. There a lot of people look to the phrase, judge not lest ye be judged. But it doesn't mean that we can't be fruit inspectors, right? What that means is you don't know what's in somebody's heart. You don't know if they're a believer, if they've given their life to Christ or not. But what we can do is, as my pastor calls it, we can be fruit inspectors. We can look at the results of people's actions. We can compare them to what they say versus what they do. And in Kamala Harris's, in her example, what she says to Anderson Cooper is a very different thing than what she says at a rally. Here's the reason why. Kamala Harris is an empty suit. And I know that that's a cliche, but allow me to explain. For so long, Kamala Harris has been pandering to this group or that group, depending on what office that she's running for. If she's running for the Attorney General of California, well, then she's going to be the crime fighter number one. She's going to lock people up, and there isn't going to be any crime in her city. But when she's running for the United States Senate, well, then it's, we've been tough on criminals. And when the pressure got too great when she was Attorney General, she let criminals out of jail. But you better watch it if you're a pothead there, because if you get caught with a small amount of pot in Kamala Harris's California, you're going to prison. The truth is that Kamala Harris left disproportionately prosecuted black men in California and left them in prison for far longer than her prison sentence. And here's the biggest problem with that. You always hear Democrats talking about freedom and, how the Republicans, they wanted to restrict their freedom. Well, the truth is, once somebody goes to prison and they serve their sentence, they're done. Now, I know that we've got laws afterwards, depending on the crime. You may not have your voting rights back, or you may not have your gun rights. But once your sentence is done, you're done. It is absolutely unconscionable that Kamala Harris would leave people in prison past their sentence. Once the judge pronounced, hey, you're going to serve 6 months, and when it's 6 months to the day, you ought to be walking out of the door. But the reason that Kamala Harris did that is there was some upcry in California about crime, and so she had to appear as a crime fighter. Later in Congress, when she was in the United States Senate and America's cities were burning, Portland and Minneapolis, when rioters were going nuts, well, then she had to pander to who she thought was sympathetic in the black community, and she helped set up a fund to bail people out of jail. So, people could go burn down a police station, and they could get help from Kamala Harris to get them out of jail. It depends on which situation Kamala Harris is in to what she's going to say. Last night on CNN, she had a big group of people watching, far less than had she had that town hall on Fox, but in any case, it was, I pray every day. But when it was last week at a rally, well, you folks are at the wrong rally. You should really go to the one down the street. This is political pandering from, at its best example. And that's pretty much all you need to know about Kamala Harris. I've got some more sound bites coming up after the break, and then we're going to go to Tim Walz and tell you how much gun control that gun owner has in store for you. Next. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but it's hunting season. And one thing that you can be absolutely certain of is while you're tromping around in the boonies, at some point it's going to snow. A lot. And you definitely want to make sure that you keep your feet nice and toasty warm. The best way that you can do that is to order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the warmest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way.
Watch out. Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. From every county in this state to every state in this nation, it's Cowboy state politics. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live. Documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. A record that nobody is even going to come close to. Excuse me. And a little cough there. Welcome back to the program. If you want to be part of the show, the studio line is 307-374-8989. I've got the phone lines open, so if there's something that you want to talk about, go ahead and give me a call. 307-374-8989. Just give me a call, and let's talk about it. Before the break, we were talking about Kamala Harris's performance on CNN last night. And there's the soundbite that I've saved until the very last is probably the best question that Anderson Cooper asked Kamala Harris, and it's the one that all of us want to hear. Hey, man, if you're going to do all this stuff, why haven't you done any of it in the last 3 years? We're all pretty sure that it was you making the decisions in the White House. So why is it that all of these things that you say are great ideas, why is it that you haven't done those? And well, here is what she said.
Some voters, though, might ask, you've been in the White House for 4 years, you were vice president, not the president, but why wasn't any of that done for the last 4 years?
Well, there was a lot that was done, but there's more to do, Anderson. And I'm pointing out things that need to be done, that haven't been done, but need to be done.
Oh, I'm pointing out things that need to be done, that we haven't done. Now, again, she didn't even answer the question. She went straight to the word salad. In fact, let's listen to it again.
Some voters, though, might ask, you've been in the White House for 4 years, you were vice president, not the president, but why wasn't any of that done for the last 4 years?
Well, there was a lot that was done, but there's more to do, Anderson. And I'm pointing out things that need to be done, that haven't been done, but need to be done.
Oh, that haven't been done, that need to be done. Back to the word salad that David Axelrod mentioned. See, there is no answer to why. Oh, well, in Kamala Harris's opinion, anyway, she's not going to answer why she hasn't done all of these things, because if she did, well, then she would have to admit that she has been an absolute failure as vice president, and so too has this administration. That's why you don't hear them talking about Bidenomics anymore. You remember when, right before Kamala Harris was, well, actually a little bit before, but before they did the coup, well, it was Bidenomics is working. Yeah, we're having success all across the country, and this is just absolutely fantastic. Well, the truth is that Bidenomics didn't ever work. It was socialistic policies, handouts to everybody that had their hand out, and none of it was actually helping the economy. Inflation was soaring, and it still is. And that is the result of every socialist economic scheme, that it's not going to help the economy at all, ever. And when you, as Margaret Thatcher said, when you run out of other people's money to spend, socialism ends up being a gigantic failure. Next up, Tim Walz is talking about how he has got some great gun control policies for you. You know, he's a gun owner and he fully understands the Second Amendment. And there is no way that, you could ever accuse him of, not being a gun owner and not being in support of the Second Amendment. No, that's not Tim Walz. So in our next segment, things that go boom.
That's great. That's what I'm gonna
From Breitbart, Tim Walz uses his Daily Show appearance to push Kamala Harris's big three gun controls. Now, I know you're going to want to talk about this. So, again, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989 if you want to be part of the program. And I quote, during an October 22nd appearance on The Daily Show, Democrat vice presidential candidate and Second Amendment crusader Tim Walz called for red flag gun laws, universal background checks, and a ban on AR-15s and other rifles. Because he's a gun owner, and he understands the Second Amendment. The topic of guns came up when host Jon Stewart indicated how the approach toward guns varies depending on whether one is talking about urban gun owners or rural gun owners. Walz responded, yes, but dead children in their schools means the same thing in rural areas as it does in urban areas. He told Stewart, responsible gun owners know that you can protect the Second Amendment, but your first responsibility is those kids. Walz said, you can do red flag laws, extreme risk protection orders, background checks, and you can do getting assault weapons out of the streets. So why not just go for the full Monty and take everybody's guns away, old Timmy boy? On August 6th of 2024, Breitbart News warned that Walz wanted the three central gun controls that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have spent years pushing in Washington, D.C. Those three are red flag laws, universal background checks, and an assault weapons ban. Now, Walz pushed these three gun controls on The Daily Show, and he did so under the guise of safety. And that's what all of these gun control advocates always do. We're not safe. And so we have to restrict your Second Amendment. I mean, everybody wants to be safe, right? Well, the reality is that freedom and liberty is not safe. And as Benjamin Franklin said, those who would trade essential liberty for a little temporary safety deserve neither. And that is absolutely true. None of these gun control laws are going to apply to criminals. And so, and the left, they're smart enough to know this. They've been advocating for gun control for a very long time. And so there's no reason why we shouldn't assume that they don't already realize that criminals, by their very definition, don't follow gun laws. And so the only logical conclusion is that Democrats don't really care about criminals having guns. They care about you having guns. And so we have to ask the next leading question as to, now, why is that? Because, and this is a simple answer, and I'm sure that this is going to result in my inbox filling up with messages, but the reason why they want your guns is because they're about to do something to you for which you would shoot them. That is it, my friends. They're going to take your freedom and your liberty, and they're worried that in response, you're going to smoke them. And so you can't have guns. And by the way, and this is another new pet peeve of mine, there probably aren't that many actual AR-15s around, the original Armalite rifle. Now, there are lots of different AR type rifles, the AR platform, but the actual Armalite rifle, my guess is there probably aren't that many around. Now, the AR-15 style weapons, and I was making a joke there, but the AR-15 platform is the most popular type of rifle in America. I don't even know how many AR-15 style guns, 308s, 223, 7.62s. I don't even know how many guns there are, but there are millions upon millions of them. And I would love to see Tim Walz try to go out and collect guns, because it's not going to go good. The reason why the Second Amendment exists is that our founding fathers had just finished up fighting a Revolutionary War against people that wanted to disarm them. That was one of the very first things that happened in the American Revolution. The British took control of an armory. Why? Because throughout history, back to the English kings, and now I'm paraphrasing Antonin Scalia, they wouldn't lock people up. They didn't have jails big enough. But what they would do is they would take away the arms. And that way they could force their peasants to do whatever it is that they wanted them to do, because they couldn't protect themselves. An armed citizenry is a free citizenry. And anytime you hear any gun control nonsense coming out of anybody from the left, you should run for the hills. I mean, I'm sure most people that listen to this program already know that. But even if you're a Democrat and you're just listening to this program for your show prep, well, then you should be very worried too, because they're going to take your guns also. You know, it's fascinating. All these socialists, Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, all of them, they all assume that when their socialist plan comes together, that, you know, they are going to be the privileged ones. They're going to be the ones at the top. And then, you know, so they're not going to have to abide by any of these things. I would point them to the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. Yeah. Lenin used the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks were the working class. The Soviets, they were kind of the upper class communists, but they used the Bolsheviks to do all the chaos in the streets. And when the revolution had happened and Lenin was in power, you know what he did? He shot people that weren't going to follow along with his plans, because they thought the revolution was about something else. They were the useful idiots. And I mean, that's a direct quote from Vladimir Lenin. That he ended up shooting the useful idiots. So all of these people that are in favor of socialism and the Democrat Party, and all of these radical Kamala Harris, Tim Walz supporters, the people that have the signs in their front yard, they believe, first of all, that everything is going to be great and it'll be this fantastic utopia. But in the end, it will be them. It will be they that are going to be the subjects. And it's absolutely fascinating, my friends, the degree at which people are ignorant of history. History really, I mean, the events really never change. It's the same events. Nothing new has happened in the world. They just come about differently. And the results are the same. And it absolutely blows my mind, my friends. And it's, yeah, exactly. And you know, my friends, I've got this, I'm just looking at my soundboard now, and I've got this great circus music that I loaded it on there because I figured that at some point I would just play the circus music in the background when I'm talking about the Democrats and the socialists, and I always forget about it every single time. We'll have more of Cowboy State Politics live when we come back. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a selection of better news, entertainment, and commentary than right here on the Independence Network, with great voices like Joey Carenti from Just Blame Joey, Ken Pendergraft from The Ramble-Roon, Tom Kelly from Wide Right Turn, and the lovely Christine from The Hair Affair. And of course, my program, Cowboy State Politics, Wyoming's most listened to political program. Also, don't forget to check out the articles section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program.
I appreciate that you did acknowledge that we are a country that is faced with problems and issues. With the Supreme Court being plagued with issues, would you be in favor of expanding the court to, say, 12, so each justice has only one circuit court other than Chief Justice to assist in making judgments more balanced?
Oh, I know, my friends. One of the great questions. The Democrats, they always want to get control of the courts. They've always wanted to do that, all the way back to FDR. I think just about everybody was taught in grade school that FDR wanted to pack the court. Now, he was mad that the Supreme Court kept knocking down a lot of his acronym agencies, and so he decided, well, I'm just going to change the court. Well, Democrats really haven't changed at all. They're still up to their same old dirty tricks. They still want to pack the court. They want to do away with the Electoral College. So that was a question from the town hall last night. Are you in favor of expanding the court to, say, 12 justices? And if Kamala Harris is in control of the White House, well, and they get control of Congress, well, they can expand the court to do anything, because it's not in the Constitution how many justices are on the Supreme Court. In fact, the court system really isn't in the Constitution to any great degree. They just sort of set up, our founders just sort of set up the framework, but they didn't tell anybody how things were going to work. Well, here is what Kamala Harris had to say in response to that question.
Well, to your point, there is no question that the American people increasingly are losing confidence in the Supreme Court. And in large part because of the behavior of certain members of that court and because of certain rulings, including the Dobbs decision and taking away a precedent that had been in place for 50 years, protecting a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. So I do believe that there should be some kind of reform of the court, and we can study what that actually looks like. But I do believe. But again, let's just, while you raise the point of the court, understand that, again, in 13 days, the American people will decide who is the next.
Okay, all right. I can't take it anymore. So, yeah, of course, we can study what that means, packing the court. But I think everybody already understands what it means to pack the court. And I think everybody pretty much knows why you want to pack the court. For the same reason that they want to do away with the Electoral College, is to institute their democracy. And as I mentioned on yesterday's broadcast, and this has become a real big pet peeve for me, that when they say our democracy or their democracy, what they really mean is the democracy that they are trying to set up in this country. Because we don't live in one of those, my friends. We live in a constitutional representative republic. And our founders knew the dangers of a democracy because they've watched it. They knew what happened in ancient Greece. They knew that it absolutely is bound to fail, that it becomes mob rule. And that's why they set up a series of different branches of our government, and quickly. And a lot of people don't know this, but before we decided that senators were going to be elected by popular vote, the senators were selected by the state legislatures. The state legislature would pick two people, and they would send them to Washington, D.C. And the reason for that is there's a series of representation. The people directly elect the House of Representatives. That happens every 2 years because our founders believed that those people who control the purse strings, the House of Representatives, need to be the most accountable to the people. And so every 2 years, we have an election for all 435 members of the House of Representatives. Well, then our founders knew that the states themselves had also had to have representation. And so the state legislatures, they would determine who the senators were. And then when you get to the president, so the House of Representatives represents the people. The Senate represents the states. The president represents everybody. He's the head of the federal government. So it's a series of representation across our entire system. The Democrats don't want that. They want mob rule, which is why every election that a Republican wins, and the last one was Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, you heard the left go ballistic that he didn't win the popular vote. Well, so what? He won the Electoral College. That's in our Constitution. It was set up by our founders for a reason, and that's how we select the president. But if the left is successful at getting rid of the Electoral College, well, then everything will be mob rule, and the entire country will be run by America's largest cities. Wyoming will have no significance whatsoever. Our 500,000 people, when you compare that to the population of the city of New York, is peanuts. And so, if you want to do away with that system, if you want mob rule, if you want your voice to become nothing, well, then vote for Kamala Harris. Make a stupid decision like that. I mean, she's basically told you everything that she's going to do, and it's no different than Joe Biden. I began the show today telling you how Kamala Harris really is Joe Biden 2.0, and there's no reason why you shouldn't expect that that's going to happen. That isn't going to happen again. I mean, the Democrats, the left, they tell you everything that they're going to do. All you have to do is just listen to them. Take them at their word, because they've told you everything that they want to do. And it boggles my mind how we can dismiss what these people say when they are radical leftists and they tell you we're going to remake the Supreme Court, we're going to pack it, we're going to do away with the Electoral College. What do you think their plans are? Oh, yeah, we're going to take away your guns, too. Yeah, that way you can't prevent us from doing all of our evil plans. Take them at their word, my friends. On tomorrow's broadcast, and this is actually the second Open Line Friday, but on tomorrow's show, I'm going to have the phone lines open all show long. And here's the difference. During the week, you kind of have to talk about what I want to talk about. If there's a caller, if I'm talking about the Electoral College and somebody else wants to talk about green energy, probably not going to answer the phone or take that call. But on Friday, it is entirely up to you. Whatever you want to talk about, it is my listener appreciation day every single week, and it's a new tradition that we've started or that I've started. And if you haven't noticed, I've been making some changes to the program. There's some slight changes in the advertising. We've got Open Line Friday here pretty soon. I'm going to add another camera so that you get another view of what's happening in the studio. I did order some lights, so those of you who sent me messages saying, hey, Representative Pendergraft kind of looks like the Shadow Man. Yeah, well, last night I ordered some lighting for the studio. So there's going to be a lot of changes happening to the program. And I have to tell you, I'm absolutely excited about it. I'm totally stoked to get this new camera and the lighting, and it's going to become, as much as I possibly can, a full-blown, once a day live program, and I'm just doing it because I know that the live program is popular and people like to watch it. So keep watching for all those changes on the program. Tomorrow, Open Line Friday. Don't forget about that. Maybe write down the number. It's 307-374-8989. I'm going to put out a notice on Facebook right after I finish the program so that you can get ready for it, so that you can plan, you can prepare, you can get your question ready, you can stump me. We can talk about whatever you want. So I'm super excited about it. Now, we've got about a minute left in the show. Let me tell you about some things that are going on today. If you're around Sheridan County tonight at the Ramada Inn, starting at, I believe it starts at 6 o'clock, we're going to have a town hall about taxes. We're going to talk about how terrible this 1% tax is. And I kind of mentioned this during the show, but there's a lot of these tax proposals happening in all sorts of different counties. The best solution is just to vote no on them because our government already spends way too much money. And it doesn't really matter what they're telling you they're going to spend your money on. They're going to do whatever they want with it. So it is another attempt for government to gain more of your money, to steal it from you, so that they can continue their reckless and absolutely irresponsible spending. So if you're around Sheridan tonight, come on down to the tax hall at the Ramada Inn. Starts at 6 o'clock. We're going to talk about taxes, and we're going to tell you the truth behind all of this. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.